So hello everyone, thanks again for joining us. For those of you who just joined, welcome to our show. What we'll be talking about today is how our guest became highly hireable and nailed his first UX job search. So we have invited an awesome guest who is a seasoned UX professional and has quite a bit of experience in the field by now, who will share lots of insights with you and answer most of your pressing, hopefully all of your pressing questions. We'll introduce our wonderful guest in just a few minutes. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginX. We help people who know UX basics and want to transition into UX. Our program is a part-time UX career accelerator with real mission-driven client projects that provides a guaranteed way to become highly marketable and land a UX role. So unlike most traditional bootcamps or career programs, we allow our participants to build real experience, strong real client portfolio, crucial soft skills like UX team collaboration, client and stakeholder management, and presentation. They're usually listed on most job descriptions, as you've probably seen, and master the UX job search and interviewing necessary to actually land a UX role. All in a collaborative and fun environment and under the guidance of industry practitioner mentors from many top companies. And I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, but just want to give you a bit of a background for credibility purposes. The company was started in New York City, and we have run many virtual cohorts and helped around like 160 people get hired into UX roles. And we'll tell you more about the virtual program and also make a special announcement closer to the end of the event. Of course, that part is completely optional for you. All right. So here are some companies that the grads were hired by. So we've seen essentially lots of people go through this entire UX career transition journey. So Adam, it's great to have you here. So thanks again for joining us. Really excited to have the discussion with you because I know you have quite an interesting story. And I think you've gotten quite good at getting and landing all these roles at all these wonderful companies and getting hired, right? So would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Michael. My name is Adam Chapman. I am a UX researcher. Currently, I'm a senior UX researcher with Google on contract through a company called Acraya, which is only kind of important in terms of how you describe these things, but functionally, I'm there every day. Prior to this, I was at Meta a couple of times. Actually, I worked in a variety of different roles there. I was doing things in the metaverse with VR headsets, and I still have a few around somewhere. I was at JP Morgan at Twitter. Well, it was still Twitter, and before whatever it became in this iteration. Gosh, where else have I been? Morgan Stanley briefly, US Bank, and a few other things. And I started as an advertising researcher until I kind of got lucky and saw the light. And I live in New York. So that's sort of a little bit about me.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Adam. So let's jump into the discussion. And by the way, just a reminder for everyone, I know some questions popping up in the chat. So just to clarify, we use this Zoom webinar product, right? That basically has a special Q&A section, right? That makes it much easier, more effective, and better for everyone to manage all these questions. So please use that section. You'll just see that Q&A section, right? And this way you can also upvote others' questions, and we make sure we address the most popular ones that many people are interested in, and ideally try to make sure the questions are focused on what we're discussing, right? On the actual topic. And just a reminder, we'll make a special announcement about the program and something else closer to the end of the event. And we'll also share this career transition roadmap summary handout with a few slides. So stick around if you'd like to get that. All right. So Adam, let's start from the beginning. Tell me a little bit more. So I know we have lots of questions for you here. So I want to know all the details and share all the wonderful insights. Um, so let's start from the beginning. Like what were you doing before you even decided to transition into UX?
I was an advertising researcher, and specifically the ways that like advertising campaigns would be effective. So I had two clients. I was working for an agency called Universal McCann. At two clients at two different times. First, I was with Hershey on the Hershey account, and then I was on Spotify. So each time it's a couple of years. But even leading up to that, honestly, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, like professionally. I had been a professional writer for a few years. I went to grad school for quantitative sociology and like I majored in animal behavior in undergrad. So I was really kind of all over the place and found that like every job that I would get wasn't really satisfying to me. And then sometime I think in like 2018, 19, something like that, I wound up working with a life coach, which I never thought I would. But no offense to life coaches. I just didn't think that was for me. But I got very lucky and I could kind of trace back all of the things that led me to UX as just being very lucky. But she didn't know what UX was and maybe still doesn't, but she encouraged me to kind of like open up my eyes more and realize opportunities where I might not have been able to identify them before. So I somehow got lucky and like found that UX existed and it sounded like something that I would be interested in doing. And then I really got lucky because the agency that I was working for, the advertising agency, we had a sister agency that did like developed our own products in-house, like tools that we would use in advertising. And one day, a product manager asked me if I would sit down for a usability interview. And I said, yeah, of course, sure. And I did, and I couldn't believe that that was a job because it just seemed like so much fun. And I was so excited about it that it kind of put me on that path. And from that point on, it was kind of off to the races, and I just started seeing opportunities everywhere for me to explore this. And eventually, I even, found Michael and Beginx, and that was a great fit. I couldn't do the first session, but then by the time the second one rolled around, I was ready and I could do it. And then that was, all I needed, and then I was off.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's cool. Thank you for sharing a lot of the background. So maybe tell me a little bit more, like why did you, on top of that it seemed like a fun job, right? What else? Like why did you want to get into UX?
So I'd wanted to work in tech and I can't code. I've tried a bunch of times to learn and it's just not my thing. And I would be competing against people for whom very much it was their thing. So I thought that was probably not the best way to go. Um, I don't really have any artistic skills. So I didn't think design was going to be something I was interested in. And basically, I kept, I wasn't aware of other fields within tech that I thought I could do until this came along. And I had always been, I mean, the polite way of putting it is just like very curious by nature, more directly, just kind of a professional nerd in a lot of ways. So that appealed to me, the idea that I could be learning things um, as a job and then also working on products and making them better. Because I, like many people probably who are watching this, have used a couple pieces of software in the past that wasn't their favorite. and for a variety of reasons. And I thought, I'd love to be able to work on these kinds of things. How can I actually fit in here? So it was a matter of, again, trying to understand all the different components of what goes into like software development. And I'm putting software in the sort of umbrella term, which obviously, websites and apps and everything like, all fall into that. But everything that I thought went into it that I could do or couldn't do, I'd sort of make like lists of things. And I didn't think marketing was really it for me. And I didn't think, um, like some more on the back end, like ops and like, accounting, those kinds of things didn't really appeal. But this did. This was really something that felt like I could meaningfully contribute, like creating something. And if I'm very lucky, actually see and even experience the benefit of what I get to work on.
Mm. Yeah, that's great. So you kind of used a method of elimination in the beginning, right? So
Yep.
that's cool. That's cool. So you decided to do it. What were, and I have a lot of more specific questions about all the stages of your journey, but just initially, briefly, what were some of the biggest challenges for you in the beginning?
I think for me, the biggest challenges were um, trying to figure out what I needed to know because as a researcher, and I mean, both academically and in industry, I had to learn, what to learn. And so this fits, especially the research part, fits for people who are, like really curious naturally and like want to continue investigating and discovering new things. But um, but it's always really hard to break into any industry, and what everyone wants to do is appear like they know what they're talking about, and I didn't. And I, when I did a bunch of like independent, they call it LinkedIn Learning now classes, just to get, a gist of what's going on. And I, tried to look up stuff from like Nielsen Norman, and which is still a great resource. But all kinds of other places to try and understand, like how do people with these jobs talk? Like how do they present themselves? What do they, like bring in terms of skills that I have and I can highlight that I don't have and I need to cultivate, or find ways to, like work around in some ways. But but basically it was trying to position myself as someone who while still junior, obviously, I'd never done it before professionally, at least like was conversant in the ways that like they would want you to be. And so they didn't feel like they had to, the hiring managers and such wouldn't feel like they had to teach you too much, that, that you'd be like, okay, well, like you're a little green, that's fine, we can work with that. But if I were really, like unfamiliar with like things that I should have been familiar with, then I couldn't, even get an interview anywhere.
Mm. Okay, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So that's good. And by the way, I already see lots of questions here. Amazing job. Love all the action and Q&A. So thank you, Annalisa, Farouk, Mallory, Yuna, Sidra, Kelly, Sakshi, Kim, Ben. So lots of questions here. Amazing. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible. Keep those coming. Keep upvoting them as well. And so here's what I wanted to ask you next, Adam. Um, in terms of building the hard skills, right? And I know you mentioned LinkedIn Learning, right? So it sounds like that was kind of your starting point. So just briefly, what do you think in terms of building hard skills? What were the most important ones that employers looked for in your case, in your experience?
So I am some kind of qualitative slash mixed methods researcher, and the skills, the hard skills, vary based on, for research at least. And Michael, you obviously know this, but for our audience, um, there are three primary types of researchers. in UX. There's qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. And mixed methods kind of takes a little bit of both, but it varies job by job. So there's no like you need to learn this, this, and this. So I had a kind of background as an advertising researcher in some of the quantitative area, not necessarily in doing like statistical regressions and like, really advanced kind of stats, but kind of a passing familiarity with it. And I went to grad school for statistics too. So I, knew enough to be dangerous and knew like, what not to do. But in the qualitative side, I needed to learn a lot more than I actually thought I would, because I thought qual meant talk about your feelings and that kind of thing, which it does to some degree, but there are a lot of methodologies within qualitative that I never heard of before, and I needed to learn. So the bread and butter of it, is the usability study, which is sort of what it sounds like, where I were to say, um, in a study, like say, okay, this is a website, and like, like, can you tell me how you would do this to that? Like the classic example that I use is like, say I was working in Google Maps and I were to ask you, okay, how would you get from, like your home to your like office by public transportation? And then have you walk me through how to do that? I needed to learn, what are the kinds of questions that you need to ask about, because there are ways of asking. First, there are questions that, may appear intuitive at first, but it wouldn't occur to you if you didn't actually consult a list of like, okay, what are the standard types of questions that you're supposed to ask? And how do you ask them? Because you can ask them in very leading ways, or you can ask them in more open ways that invite people to more freely express their thoughts. Beyond that, there are other types of methodologies, just focusing on the hard skills for now still, where you uncover things about something called information architecture, for example, which is just like the structure of how information is actually laid out on a web, on an app or a website, and like in the menus and everything, like which menu items go within which menu, because all of that has to be planned, and it makes the most sense, based on how people are like, what their mental models are is the term that we use. And so knowing how to do those kinds of studies was something I needed to learn. There are different types of interview techniques, for example. There are, sorry, one second, I saw you message me and I want to just make sure that I say this. Um, Sorry,
Yeah,
rapid
yeah,
fire.
all good,
Yep,
all
got it,
good.
got it, got it. Yep, okay. So yeah, lots of techniques, lots of methodologies. And I had to, like be at least familiar enough with them to know, okay, like I see how they're structured. I can try and do them. And, when I need to actually use them, I can look up references to understand how.
Hmm. Okay, okay. So yeah, that's great. And no, thank you for covering this, because I know like each of these questions could essentially be like its own topic, basically, right? And we could discuss it in a lot of detail. I know, like based on experience, that a lot of questions, a lot of people usually have challenges with like, how do you actually get the job? How do you become marketable? But before we get to actually searching for a job, right, we're gonna address these phases of actually building yourself up, right? So that's why we're exploring how Adam actually did that, right? Because before you market something, right, it's important to actually ensure that it's good, right? So coming back to that product and marketing and selling analogy, right? So that's why we kind of take a step back first and basically explore how do you build yourself up first, so then marketing and selling or job search makes sense, right? So, and by the way, again, see lots of questions. Amazing. We'll start taking some of them in a second. Um, and we'll basically just like kind of, I have my questions here for the interview, and then we'll take the questions from Q&A as we go, so to make it as interactive as possible. So Adam, here's what I also wanted to ask you, right? So as Jared Spool, one of the UX thought leaders, mentioned that one of our events that we invited him to be a guest speaker for, Soft skills are actually hard, right? So, and those are crucial to becoming a highly hireable candidate. So, how did you go about building your soft skills? And in your opinion, what are the top soft skills hiring managers look for in candidates, and especially like more junior candidates who are starting out? And how did you obtain those?
Yeah. So soft skills, ironically, are hard to develop, and which makes they should be called harder skills. But the way that I at least started to develop them was by talking to a lot of people, as many people as I could in industry. And I mean, I got rejected more times than I didn't, and that happens. It's fine. But don't let that deter you because the more you talk to them, the more you hear how they talk, and you start to internalize that. Beyond that, though, I think the other soft skills that I would like develop over time, um, approaching things, with a really curious mindset, and hiring managers especially like to see that they know you don't know everything. That's fine, especially as a junior. But they want you to know that you don't know everything and to be humble about that and say, like things that you are confident in, that you're not, but that you're working on. And so projecting an image of someone who is eager to learn, eager to work, I mean, which I'm sure, everybody does think they do, I hope. But challenging yourself even and taking a step back and, like asking other people for more objective uh kinds of just like appraisals of like how you actually do present yourself. Because ultimately, like people want to work with people who are easy to work with, which sounds, basic, but um, but if you find that, like if you're working places and you're like, oh, everyone's so difficult to work with, everyone's like so hard here, blah, blah, blah. There's probably an element of that that's true, but it also is incumbent on us to think, okay, like, does everyone else get along and can they all talk to each other fine? And like, am I the only one who's kind of out there? And I'm also neurodivergent also. And so for me, that was another element that I had to consider because for neurotypical people, things kind of come more naturally, but neurodivergencies, inherent in that can be someone who just isn't as self-aware. And I, at a lot of times, I mean, Michael actually been a perfect example where I was taking too long to answer a question. So, yeah, so I mean, making sure that you realize your own like strong points and points that you can grow with, and and then come up with strategies in order to actually develop those too.
All right, awesome. Don't worry, don't worry. We'll keep you on track.
Thank you. Thanks.
Not sure if I'm too different, but we'll try. Uh, all right. And by the way, also for folks, here's what I also wanted to mention. If some of you are switching, not so Adam is a UX researcher, obviously, right? And if some of you are switching into like classic UX roles or maybe product design roles, etc., right? So don't think that we'll only focus on UX research because there is a lot of overlap, right? And it also really depends on the company because some companies have just UX research, like pure UX research roles. Some companies have this like classic UX role that encompass the whole process, right? From like research up to detailed design. Some companies have UX UI. Basically, the key point I'm trying to make is that we're going to address all these different phases and stages of this career transition, how Adam became more marketable, search for his first role, etc. So it's going to be applicable not just to UX research, even though of course it's going to be more applicable to UX research, but also to design roles and just any type of UX roles essentially. So here's what I also wanted to ask Adam. So did you have, so before you started searching, or before you landed your first UX role, did you have any professional UX experience prior to that?
Sort of. Um, it depends on what you mean by professional. Um, I'd done UX work in companies, so by that definition, yes. Um, I was not paid for doing UX work professionally, so maybe not. The way that it happened was that I mentioned the agency that got me into it, in the beginning, the product manager. And I basically hounded everyone I could there to let me do something for them. And eventually, someone desperate said, "What, free work? Okay." And which in hindsight maybe wasn't the best idea that she could have had. But I didn't think twice about it. So I did some work for them. I did content analysis actually. Because of my background as a writer. And so, I mean, I was like well suited to doing that. And then I think I did what was the other thing that I did? Kind of like a heuristic evaluation. It wasn't exactly that, but I mean, it was basically evaluating like their website and making recommendations for what to do. This was all outside of research, but it was more just like applying like best practices kind of thing. And um, and I mean, I made case studies out of it and I talked about it. And, by all accounts, like, yeah, I was doing research for this, like, multi-billion dollar company and through my proper agency. And I took meetings, like, with clients and stuff. So sort of professional. But it was very much just sort of like, a little bit of that. And then through BeginX, obviously, I was partnered with like our company that cohort was Amplio, a company that dealt with fitness coaching, and so that became a professional experience. And it was really useful. It was really helpful because I, like went through the whole process far more than I did with the other company that I was doing it with. But yeah, that was the kind of experience that I had that was professional. Otherwise, and it was volunteer, and that's okay. I mean, like it was what I could get, and it helped. But no, other than that, it was all outside of UX.
Okay, okay. Well, it still sounds like quite a bit because you'd be surprised. There are still a lot of people who try to make this transition without any UX experience. So, and by the way, when I refer to professional experience, right, or just work experience, it's basically experience working with a real company, right? So that's how we define it, right? So because that's what really matters. It doesn't really matter if it's like what type of bureaucratic setup it is or what type of like is it W-2, is it volunteer, is it whatever, right? I mean, it could matter for some companies, of course, but the key part is doing work with a real company because work is work, right? And that's what you want to showcase to your future employers, right? So, and as you guys heard, right? So Adam participated in the program, but obviously that doesn't mean we're going to be talking about just the program, right? Of course. So we're going to explore his entire journey and kind of analyze and dissect it and see like what insights you could get, like what you could do. Doesn't matter if you apply to the program, if you do this on your own, right? Or in some other way, right? But how you could apply it to make yourself more hireable, right? And then to find that first UX role. So, and Adam, let me also ask you this. So I know you kind of, it seems like you had a hunch, right? That you need to build some work experience prior to landing your like full-time UX role, right? And did you actually try like just trying to land that first UX role prior to gaining any of that work experience at all?
No, I didn't.
That was smart.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly felt so like unprepared, despite having like what's called consumer industry research experience. I had 4 years at that point, and grad school and blah blah blah. Like I had worked for quite some time, in fields that might if you squint you could kind of call it that, or adjacent maybe, but I didn't have the confidence at all to say that. And looking back, I think that was really the right call because I would have gone. I doubt I would have got any interviews. And had I been lucky enough to get one, I mean, I would have sounded like someone who didn't know what he was talking about because I was someone who didn't know what I was talking about.
Okay, okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And just to come back to the hard skills part for a bit, so you mentioned to basically just get this understanding, better understanding of all these um, research methods and like qualitative research, et cetera, right? So did you mainly use LinkedIn Learning for that? Did you use any other platforms or ways to, just for that hard skills or technical skills part that you want to recommend maybe?
Sure. So if I'm sure LinkedIn Learning still exists,
Yeah.
but that was really helpful. I mentioned Nielsen Norman, the NN Group, which I'll plug for them because they kind of invented the whole field. And then a variety of different books. How many books did I read? It's been a few years, but I think Steve Krug had one called like, don't tell me how to how
Don't make me think.
don't make me think. That's it. Yes. Make me think, but don't make me think is the name of the book. And that was great. And there were a couple other ones. The thing is that with all those books, like you read one and like, you kind of read them all. Tomer Sharon, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago or last year, I think, was kind of a mentor of mine later, and he had written a few books himself that were like very helpful. They'll all have really helpful elements, but they're all going to kind of focus on the same broad concepts, and they're just going to be their own types of their own like ways of doing it. But reading a few books familiarizes you enough with the just like the field and the approaches and everything, the different methodologies and such. And then at this point, I'm sure there are other platforms out there that help too. But once you kind of like hear them repeated a few times, you're like, okay, like the diminishing returns, I guess, in terms of like continuing to read more and more.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because I feel like that's a kind of a trap that a lot of people get into, right? They kind of want to learn and learn. They never think they're ready, right? And the key is usually to like learn a little bit and then start applying, doing and practicing, and actually ideally in a real setting as quickly as possible. Maybe not with the first project, but like at least with the second, right? Because that will actually get you the real learning and the real skills, right? Because I mean, ultimately, there's like so much content out there. You could sit there and learn for the next 30 years and still not do anything, right? You'll probably feel
Very
good,
much.
but you will
Yep.
not be hired,
Yep.
so. All right. So I want to quickly talk briefly about, so Annalisa, I know you asked a question here, and we'll probably come back to answer that in more detail, but the question was, how do I get a career in such a saturated market? It seems like there are so few openings for someone who is new, transitioning into the field. So, and the reason, Annalisa, I want to come back to this in a second, right, is, and Mika, don't put the question away yet. No, she clicked the button to answer it. Is first by making yourself more hireable and marketable. And that's the reason we're talking about this, like before even you get up to job search, right? Because again, if you build a product that is this is not very strong, you can market and sell for 5 years and still not going to get anywhere, right? So that's the key, is to first build it up. And to build it up, you need to know like what to actually build and how to actually build it and how to make it great, right? So that's one of the first key phases, right? That's what I was kind of trying to address in the beginning, right? And then of course you master the marketing and selling piece, because that's very important too, right? So we'll come back to answering your question in more detail. And the good news is that the market is, I mean, that's not the good news. It is saturated in a way. And I wouldn't say it's saturated, but it's tough, right? It's been tough for a few years now. And 2020, because of the overhiring in the beginning of the pandemic, right, that happened by all the tech companies at like 2021 or so. And then you saw what happened, right? Then once things started coming back to a more normal state, then all these layoffs came in, right? And that flooded the market basically, and that's what we're still dealing with now. The good news is that 2023, based on the research and stats that we did and looked at, 2023 was probably the worst. 2024 was still bad, but a little bit better. And 25, we're definitely seeing a lot of progress, right? A lot more companies hiring, a lot more people getting hired. So it's getting better. So there is a light at the end of the tunnel. I see a lot of people who kind of put this on hold, right? It's like, oh, I don't want to get into this anymore in this terrible market. So I see a lot of people getting back into it as well. So overall, we're kind of moving in the right direction. So Annalise, and we'll come back to kind of answer your question in more detail as well. Um, so Adam, I know you already kind of mentioned how you started gaining that real experience, right? So basically, it was some volunteer work at some companies that you did, and then you did the program, and I believe you also did an additional program project afterwards, a little bit as well. Um, Maybe tell me a little bit more about that, right? So first you volunteered. Was it the company where you worked already, or was it just some other company?
So in the advertising world, when like the agencies model and everything, there are holding companies, then they have like agencies that are all under those holding companies. And this was a sister agency of mine. I wasn't working for them. I was working for my agency, and I probably wasn't supposed to be working from like, the other one anyway. But I had my manager's blessing. Um, to be honest, he was pretty checked out anyway, so he didn't seem to care too much. But he knew that this was good for me, and like he supported me. And of course, I was getting my work done. And if I was getting my work done and I wasn't causing problems otherwise, then he said, sure, like why not? I mean, there are a lot of reasons why not, but again, like I was lucky. So so yeah, so I wasn't working directly for them, and eventually got in trouble for devoting some of my time to them. But it was worth it in the end. I mean, I saw an opportunity, and I'm going to keep coming circling back to this, because obviously with like the people who are asking questions about like saturated market, how do I get in and everything, um, it's, I mean, it is hard. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it is hard. But being creative about finding opportunities is really crucial. And you can tell how much I believe that, how much I slowed down when I said that. But yeah, because like I had said prior to that career, the life coach who I had met, I never would have even considered like trying something unconventional to find a way into a field to try to do something different. I was just sort of like resigned to, okay, I guess I have to do this. So, so to bring it back to like, what you were asking about though, they were volunteer, and I tried volunteering for a couple of small startups as well. And there are other things we could talk about if you're interested, about want to go into that, about like why it's good and bad to work for small startups in any capacity, mainly because of something called UX maturity, where a company just isn't really set up to put UX into place the way that they should, and they have a lot of really bad habits or lack of habits, and and they just want to keep the lights on. I mean, so it's hard to like implement real processes in that kind of setting. But overall, yeah, I mean, I really tried to like just find the opportunities that I could. And I was lucky enough that I had a job at the time, so that paid the bills while I was in moonlighting doing pro bono UX work.
Okay, okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think to also like talk briefly about the point you mentioned in terms of startups versus bigger companies, et cetera, right? You also have to take into account, because for a lot of people, it's not just like basically if you have choice, right? Like where to volunteer and what type of project you can get, right? Then that becomes a concern, right? if you only have hypothetical projects, right? And then you have no idea how and what to find or where and how to ensure that it's actually good and you don't waste 2 years of your life doing something that will not result in a great case study, right?
Yeah.
So that's basically that becomes a different question as well. And we can also come back to this because I think it's a great point as well. So basically, you said that sister agency, then volunteering at some startups, then you did BeginX core program projects, and then also BeginX partner client projects after that as well, right? So essentially, so you had how many, like 4 case studies or so, or three, or
I had three solid case studies. The summer project client that we did after the primary BNX one, I had to cut short because I got a job. So for like the best of reasons. But yeah, so I came in with three pretty substantial case studies.
Okay, okay, awesome. So that's great to know. If you guys want to know more detail, because I know I have a lot of questions for Adam here about all these different phases, about like how he built experience and skills and search for work and what the interview was like. There's a lot I want to ask. Hopefully, we can get through as many of those questions as possible. But again, if you want to know more specifics, don't be shy about asking that. I want to briefly take a couple of questions here. So Farouk was asking, so you mentioned soft skills in the UX setting. What if I'm a career switcher with these soft skills, but they come from a different domain? My goal is to land my first UX job. So let me just briefly answer it because I think you're referring to like what I was talking about in that framework in the beginning. And then Adam, you can answer it more fully if you have some additional insights. So overall, for you, it's basically it's definitely transferable, right? So it's how you highlight it, right? So it's amazing if you already have some of these soft skills. The reason you also want to have this in the UX setting is that you just want to prove it and demonstrate it more clearly to employers, so you remove the risk for them of hiring you, essentially, right? So it's important to, if you already have, it's like you already have the base, but you want to build it up a little bit more, right? In a way, maybe slightly similar if you think about it from a different angle, like a lot of maybe visual designers, right? They come into and want to be product designers or UX UI designers, right? And they already have a portfolio, right? But it's all maybe focused on the UI side of things, right? So it's a great background to come from and transition into UX from, right? But you still want to have those UX case studies, right? So same thing goes about your soft skills, right? So you just want to showcase that in a UX setting, right? And just demonstrate it to them more clearly. Adam, anything else you want to like add on top of that?
Yeah, so I completely agree with that. It's really a matter of, understanding like the language that tech and or I mean broadly tech, but anything that UX would be in, and how your soft skills translate into that. Um, the in my experience, so I mainly work in large matrix organizations, and so much of the soft skills that I need to do are how to find resources and how to like get things done without, like asking my manager at every step, like, how do I do this? How do I do that? How do I get to, I mean, because at some point that is itself, I mean, like a really valuable skill is just how to be effective in these places. And that comes from like knowing, like how to find people, how to talk to them, how to, like structure, your asks in ways that they can actually help you do. But if you are a switcher and you have some of those soft skills that you just, know how to get things done, then that is just immensely helpful. So I'd add that to that. But otherwise, yes, everything Michael just said.
Okay, okay, awesome. So I want to take Yuna's question quickly as well, and then also do a quick follow-up for you on your on that experience that you were gaining prior to landing that first role. And because Yuna's question is like right spot on about this experience piece, right? So she's asking, what is the advice? And by the way, if I mispronounce anyone's name, right, obviously I apologize, it's not intentional. What is the advice you would have for people starting their career with very little or no professional UX job experience that are ultimately aiming for big tech companies? So let me also just chime in really quick, Adam, just synthesize what we already discussed, because I think we partially already answered it. The short answer is to gain that experience first. That is smarter, because that will save you a lot of time in the long run instead of just hitting the wall for 2 years and applying with just hypothetical projects. It can happen. It could pan out potentially, but I wouldn't recommend it because it's like, trying to sell something that is not yet very, like, the product is not built up yet, right? And what are you trying to sell? You're trying to sell. Instead, just build a better product and then sell it will be much easier, right? So essentially, just gaining that experience, like Adam did, right? You could volunteer for some company, you could volunteer for a startup, you can even apply to a program like ours, right? To do it in a more structured setting and kind of accelerate that process for you, right? And get career prep, right? So essentially, that's just my short guideline on that. So, Adam, what do you think?
Yeah. So everything you just said, in addition to that, um, and it sounds like you're saying ultimately aiming, so you're not saying like I have no experience, how can I get a job, like at Apple? I I know you know this, but everybody else, may have a sense of this too. But it's the like big tech companies are the hardest to get jobs at. And they pay the best, like, they have the most kind of resources for doing this. So like they're considered the most desirable places to work, and the market reflects that. I I think being open to where you will work before, and getting experience in those places, um, is, I mean, I mean, vital to doing that, and knowing that you're not going to be, at another place forever. It's a stepping stone, but you're there to learn as much as you can while you're there, and then position yourself again to kind of be ready to jump in. But also, like, look at I mean, there are so many, but if you can look at people's resumes who have worked at big tech companies, or do now, and see where they started out. And then you get a sense for, the scale of the companies that they were there before. And then you can try to find what works best for you, in order to actually, like, copy their approaches, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You shouldn't reinvent the wheel. But see what works in the past, and then, like, apply that to your experience as much as you can.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. And that's definitely a huge point. I think it's what we suggest all the time as well. If you really want to get like the most prestigious type of UX roles, you obviously it makes sense to just start somewhere. You have to get your foot in the door, right? Don't try to get into uh, like Meta right away or something like that, right? Because that can be very hard. Again, if you go to like human-computer interaction, school, like one of the most prestigious ones, it can be easier, right? If you already have that background. But if you're switching careers, you just have to get your foot in the door, get some type of role, right? And then build up, build up, build up, ideally through networking, right? And kind of meeting people, right? And it's definitely possible, right? So basically, Adam, you did exactly that, right? So first you were in the financial sector, right? And then you switched into the actual big tech, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and then I went back to finance, but that was like, yeah, I mean, just kind of flopped back and forth a little bit, but tried to stay as much in big tech as possible. And but that worked out for me.
Okay, okay. Also, just to quickly ask you about the case studies, right? So you mentioned, you did that volunteer work for that other agency, right? And then you also did some volunteer work, I think you mentioned, for some startups. Tell me a little bit more about that volunteer work for those startups. Like, did you only do like UX research phases? Did you get strong case studies from that? How long did it take you?
Yeah, so what I wound up doing with Amplio, so the BeginX company, because the other startups that I tried to help um were like startups of like one or two people, and inherently UX, especially UX research, is such a collaborative effort, and you really need buy-in from like a few different sources, and and especially somebody who is new to the field altogether. I was limited in how much I could provide, like how much value I could really provide, and I think that was I mean, quietly acknowledged by me and like my friends who I'd asked if I could help them with, because I mean, we didn't need to talk about it. It was obvious that I wasn't going to be able to do much for them. But with BeginX though, and it sounds like I'm shilling for you. I promise I'm not. It's just telling you exactly how it went down. Um, I actually, if anything, wound up getting like too much in a case study, because it was, as far as the entire product development went, from start to finish. While like as I got further in my career, the case studies like began becoming like a study that I did. I mean, and that was all that I really needed to do, as far as, or that's what I chose to do at least, for my case studies, because it turns out I don't really like making them, and I didn't feel like I wanted to do more with it. But um, obviously, a lot of hiring managers didn't share that opinion, and they would like to see a little bit of work that you had done. So I was able to kind of like chop it up and say, like, okay, here's a case study that I did about, like the usability issues that like, we looked at, or, like putting together affinity maps, whatever it was. But I was able to kind of like make them into like smaller, more bite-sized pieces. And but yeah, like the BeginX, the Amplio one was like the main focus of the case study that I did. And then um, the smaller startups didn't. Like, I think I wound up leaving them even off my resume altogether, because it just wasn't really work that I could point to and talk to about it. Because that's the other thing too. I want to so strongly make sure that, if you're doing a case study, you have to have enough context for that case study to make sense. So you have to describe, what your role was in the work that you were doing, because it would never happen that you just get dropped into a project and then dropped out, and only did enough to cover as much as the case study goes. There's going to be follow-ups, and like, there's pre-work that has to be done, and like just a variety of different tests in order to get the work done. The case study is only the kind of the highlight reel in so many ways of what you did and how you did it. And the results, like, you're just giving them really those kinds of broad strokes. But and there's going to be a lot of embellishing in any resume, in any case study, which is fine, but unless you're just amazing at improv, then you're going to want to speak from truth, and and have that kind of experience with the company that you did it with, or the like whatever, in order to like to be convincing about it, and again sound like you know what you're talking about.
So would you say, just to like sum it up, that basically Amplio case study was just like more robust and more comprehensive, and kind of that's why it was stronger, or anything else?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was. And it gave me a lot of different things to talk about. People, and I I know that, like, the hiring managers who I spoke with were like, they could see from my resume that, I was pretty novice about this altogether. But having a case study that substantial, about like how we developed a whole product, like gave them a lot of opportunities to ask questions about any different part, and I could answer them with confidence to say, yeah, we, talk about this part, talk about that part. But it gave them a lot to dig into that what they chose to instead of just, isolated little bits of it.
Okay, okay, all right, so that makes sense. All right, and just to confirm quickly, because I had a question here, because some people choose internships or try to use internships to gain experience. In your case, so you didn't try it that at all, right?
No, I was a little too old to like get in be like I had my intern days and they didn't they whatever they were like they were fine. But no, I never even considered trying to do an internship, and I don't think that I mean, I have I even worked with interns before in UX? Not really. Um,
Mm.
yeah, I mean, there are internship programs that have like been kind of like around like, what I've done, but I've never directly interacted with them before. Oh, I did have one my first time at Meta. That's right. I yeah, long time ago. Um, I mean, like, but barely interacted really with them. So yeah, I mean, if you could find one and it works out, then that's amazing. And by all means, take it, because also the nature of an UX internship is such that it would have to come from like a really established company with a really, like a high degree of UX maturity in it and everything. So if you found one that worked, then go for it. But I wouldn't rely on that as being like the primary way to get in.
Yeah, yeah, it's like, especially for career switchers, I guess it's it because a lot of these, especially these like top companies, etc., they often just go to schools and colleges and try to and masters or PhD programs or bachelors sometimes for research and try to get people from there, right? So it can be a little more tricky to get a good internship if you're career switching. Um, and I feel like the main challenge, the main issue with, because I was just talking about it with someone last night during a consultation that we're on, and it's basically sometimes as hard to get a good internship as it is to get a job, basically. So it's
Probably harder, actually, And I mean, it's crazy, but yeah, I mean, and the first job that you get in any field is always going to be the hardest to get. I mean, or nearly always, but like close enough to. And for something that, is so like open to experience any level of experience or no level of experience, by nature, it's going to attract a lot of people. I do remember though, at Meta and I think at Google, there are these like early career switching kind of things, like UX apprenticeships, or like ways that they're trying to attract people to switch in. I did work with a lovely person at Meta who did that, but yeah, I mean, like by all means apply if you're interested in it, but like don't expect a lot to come from it.
Yeah, yeah. I'd say like the biggest. I don't want to like to say like be like too negative about internships because they can be great sometimes, especially if you can find like we just talked. If you can find a good one, if it will
Mhm.
get you a good case study, that's very good. The problem with a lot of internships is that oftentimes you would just be doing a lot of like very low level work, and obviously their goal is not your next job, right? Their goal is just basically leverage inexpensive labor, basically, to speak bluntly, in a way, right? In many places, not everywhere, of course, there are some amazing ones. Um, and it's not always designed basically to kind of get you to a goal, right? So a lot of people who I've spoken with who just get any internship, yeah, they can put it on their resume. The problem is they just do some help here, they do some help there, they do some sketch, they do some wireframe, they do something else, but it's many of them do not get you strong case studies, right? So basically the key part here is that especially if you do some unpaid internship, right, definitely try to ensure that you actually are able to get a good project, good case study from it.
Yeah, and one thing I'd add to that too is that unpaid internships are not, I mean, depending, like class credits are, one thing, but otherwise, I don't think they're legal actually. Um, but um, but they if they don't have formal programs associated with them, then like the chances that they're going to actually, give you something that you can use, it's really low. And they're not going to like necessarily have your best interest at heart. I mean, like in terms of like, trying to help you develop and everything. Um, Companies that are doing legit internships, legit UX internships, could sound great and hopefully are great, but I don't know enough about like the results from them to know like do they just sound good on paper or are people actually getting good jobs like once they finish them. So that like anything, I do a lot of due diligence in trying to determine, if that's the best way to go because it could sound like it is, but you never know.
Yeah, 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 definitely. Research that and ensure it's like it's not just the company that will benefit, but you can actually benefit from it.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so let's take another quick question here from. So I don't know how much exact input, Adam, you can provide in it, but maybe you can because you mentioned you also have some writing background as well, even though I don't think you did UX writing, but let's see if we can provide some input. So Kelly was asking, any idea about the job market specifically for UX writers? I'm looking to transition into UX from other writing positions in PR, marketing, communications. My most recent role had senior in the title. Will that count towards anything in a new UX role, or will I need to start as a junior even though I have 10 years writing experience?
Ooh. It's a great question. It won't be a senior. Definitely wouldn't like start as a senior because the type of writing is different. So before it was called UX writing, it was generally technical writing. And uh, and now, I mean, content design, whatever, that kind of thing, and copywriting too. Um, but but without knowing too much about your background, Kelly, I can't say, how transferable your writing experience is going to be to that. It's going to help. It's going to help a lot. And, the ability to like, take goals and actually synthesize them into words that, get the job done. And working, I'm assuming that you've worked in like, in like companies doing this because just the nature of what, like you said you did. Um, like you're going to have a leg up for sure on younger people who like have just come out of college, for example, and are like trying to get their first writing job. I think um, but it is different enough because you're not really going to try to do persuasive writing as much as you potentially had been doing, like, and continue to do now. It's really kind of more explanatory, but in a way that like helps people accomplish certain tasks. So um, it's going to help, but unfortunately, it's probably not going to result in it's still going to be closer to entry level because there's enough that like you still wouldn't necessarily know about how product development works. Although it sounds like you'd be like a pretty quick study. So I imagine that if you were to like, get a role or even just getting interviews in that, then you would be able to find out pretty fast what would be required. Oh, Michael, you're muted.
Yeah, I was trying to plug in
But
my laptop here and so yeah, I was basically, yeah, so I think that makes a lot of sense, Adam. And I think Kelly, just to add to that, On a positive side, on a positive note, what we noticed is that I've seen quite a few people. So you may have to kind of basically start at the bottom, right, in this new area in a way. But that what often happens, we notice with some people, is that they progress much faster because of their previous background. So they start at the bottom, but then they like boom, become a UX manager in like 3 or 4 years, right? We actually had an interview with someone um, like a month ago, roughly, maybe a few weeks ago, right? And she basically, yeah, she switched from art direction or like graphic design into UX, regular role at first, and then just 1, 2, 3, like in 3 or 4 years, she became a manager already, right? Now she's a principal, and it's been like 4 or 5 years or so, right? So that's what I've noticed. It seems like a pattern. It's not guaranteed that it will happen, right? But that's what I noticed. It seems like a pattern. So that's just to add to that a little bit. Um, all right, Adam, so here's what I also wanted to ask you. Overall, like what do you think were the top 3 things that made you an attractive candidate for employers and made you stand out for your first, like when you were searching for your first UX role?
So I think the first one is probably having professional experience at all before. So having worked in big, multinational companies um, does give employers reassurance that you know how to carry yourself professionally, that you I aren't going to potentially embarrass them too much. Um, but you're like kind of pre-screened to saying, okay, like, you can hack it in offices and having, like 3, 4 years experience at the advertising job that I had meant that, okay, like I learned, I grew, I was promoted and everything. So that was probably reassuring. So that's thing number one. Thing number two was um, actually having like something like not directly related. I mean, as an advertising researcher, um people I meet ask like, oh, advertising to UX, like, is there a lot of overlap there? And there isn't, but you would never know that from the way that I would talk about it in interviews because I made it sound like it was just, UX that was spelled differently. So I really made sure to take as much as I could, and I was shameless about the way that, I think about like the advertising research that I was doing and like how that was directly applicable to UX. And in some cases I was actually telling the truth. I mean, even to this day, I'm so focused on like what audiences we're trying to talk to, attract, everything else. And that came directly from advertising, where that got like, drilled into my skull. That you need to know like who your market is and everything. And so that's vital. But the third thing I think is being clearly interested in it, because every other job that I mentioned before was like just, okay, I mean, I guess I can do this. I mean, I never really thought I was going to do it or wanted to do it necessarily, but but this was intentional. And I think that comes through. I mean, it comes through like, when I'm interviewing people. And so, people who are just like, any job, I don't care. You're like, well, great, but I don't know if that means you're going to be successful at doing this if, you don't really know enough or care much about this to do it. But if you do and that passion comes through, then you're going to sound naturally like this is your fit. And, and people want to, hire like for a good fit. So the whole goal is trying to convince them that, yeah, this is what I actually enjoy doing and I'm good at.
Yeah, I think that's, yeah, I'm a big believer in that, especially in that third point of just like basically trying to do what you're truly interested in. Because, and the reason, even if you think about it as an employer, right? Because usually there is often an overlap in what your strengths are and what you're interested in, right? Not always, but often. And that's very good because that means that if it's your strength, then you can probably do this work really well. And many employers, especially better employers, actually know that, right? And realize that. So if you can demonstrate that you're a great fit for this role and that you're really interested, makes a big selling point too. Of course, you need to get to that point and get to that place first, but it's like one of those important pieces of the puzzle as well. All right. So let's take Ben's question as well. So Ben was asking, what are your thoughts on getting any tech role and then trying to transition to UX research versus targeting UX research? I'm entry level and interested in UX research, product management, and IT ops. Previously worked in a product ops role without a PhD or master's, or even if you would have it, um, the UXR job market seems very small.
Um, it's an interesting question. I I want to tell you it's, a good idea, and it's possible. And, Michael, you were saying, foot in the door. And depending on where it could work, but like again, I mean, so where like places that I've worked are so siloed that it unless you know that you are going to be working extensively with UX research, and even then, like it's iffy, but because ultimately, I think what you're the way that that would go is that you're trying to parlay, like like working one job into working at another one. And I can speak from experience that that's risky. But it's, yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be my first choice unless you actually, again, it's a small enough company where you may have to wear different hats. And one of them may be something that was just like UX research adjacent enough that you could like convincingly like find reasons why you may need to like, pitch in and things every once in a while, then that's amazing and go for that. But if it's, at a like a big company, then I wouldn't bank on that. It just is, it's too long, I mean, of a shot to do it. You may have no interaction with UX at all, and then you just wind up wasting time doing another job that you didn't really want to do, while you could have been focusing on trying to get the job that you did want to do.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like those are great points. It seems to me that, just to add to that briefly, just try to pick the most efficient path to your goal, right? So if you already know the goal, you don't need to go in circles and go here and there and everywhere, right? And again, you may have to take some side steps, but if they're strategic, right? So it seems like what could potentially work, right? So you already mentioned you worked in product ops, right? So why not just learn about UX and kind of do what Adam did in a way, right? So you already, if you're working in that role, it's kind of related in a way, right? So it's not something completely different, right? Just learn more about UX research, right? And start doing some work, some volunteering, you don't have to go into these other tangential roles. So, but I would basically just clearly prioritize what is it that's most interesting to you, right? Is it UX research? Is it product management? Is it IT ops? Right? So, and if UX research is your true goal, it seems that just try to get into that directly. While because it doesn't see, at least to me, it doesn't seem that like, yeah, maybe if you're in product management versus product ops, it may be a little bit easier to get into UX research, but probably not that much, right? So just my personal opinion.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Actually, Yeah. Well, that's funny because actually product management, I would feel like could be one of the easiest paths to get in. Like if I had a PM who wanted to work with me on research stuff, I'd be sure. I mean, I guess if you really want to, but they're always so busy and they have so many more things to do that have nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So the sad thing is that even like the best case, you just might not have enough time. Like, and then like it'd be like even more of a like sad squandered opportunity where you're like, oh, I wish I could, but I can't. I've got this thing going on, like my job. So yeah, like I can't say I, advocate for that, but I guess never say never. And if it's the right way, then
Yeah, and I mean, just getting into product management is a whole career transition itself, right? So that can take a lot of time and that can maybe be even harder potentially, right?
yeah,
So who knows? I don't know, but I mean, I did related work a long time ago, but um, so
yeah.
yeah, it seems like it may be easier than product ops, but is it worth it to go that direction? Because it may take a lot of time to actually land that type of role. So. Hopefully that's helpful, Ben. So I know we've spent quite a bit of time here. All right, Adam. So here's what I also wanted to ask you. So in terms of your, um, what do you think made your LinkedIn and your resume effective at getting hired? And what are your top tips specifically on those search assets, as we like to call them, for our wonderful audience?
So I actually wound up working with a UX research career coach a couple of years ago. And she did an overhaul of sort of an overhaul of my resume. Um, and resume and LinkedIn, I'm kind of like using interchangeably because um, I keep parity between the two. So like maybe other people feel differently about it, but for me, it's just like they should be the same. So, um, so what worked for me, so far, at least, is um, being trying to be specific about what you've done. Like, when you've actually like done enough to be specific about it, but also in um in still in a high level, it's tricky. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, like everybody, like has like stared down their resume and thinking, oh man, like what am I doing here? But but kind of articulating it in a way that like, you could say, tell a grandparent. I mean, like, say like, okay, like this is what I've done, and like explain it in like simple enough terms and then make it a little more industry specific. But the other thing is showing impact. I mean, which is one of the cliches, but it is for a reason because they want to see that the work that you were doing wasn't just shuffling papers, but it actually served a function and you understood that it served a function because the other thing is that like knowing the purpose of what you did makes you more effective at doing it because you're not just saying like, well, my job is just to push this button. I don't care what the end result is. I just want to make sure I'm pushing it correctly and as many times as I'm supposed to or whatever. Metaphor is kind of breaking down. But in order to actually, like speak about it, thoughtfully, um, you need to know that you were hired to help your company. And there's a goal that you had that like your hiring manager had for you and like people who approved the job and everything. And you understand that goal and you are helping achieve that goal. So everything that you say in a resume should reflect that. And also, I'm a huge hypocrite because I know that I didn't do that for my last one, but I'll get around to it. And like, so do as I say, not as I, or well, mostly as I've done. If people want to add me on LinkedIn, then you'll see, like, oh, he's doing exactly what he said to do, except for the last couple, and then he didn't. But but also, I mean, at a certain level, like I mean, I guess my level, it becomes like a little less important. And you can talk broadly about it, and then they're like, okay, well, you were a senior UX researcher here, and like, you worked on like a core like eng things, and that's fine. So yeah, we'll talk about that. But they already know that you can do it. But while they don't know you can do it, then and especially for things that are like outside of UX, then really, and also tie it back to like UX like more specific skills and job recs requirements because ultimately assuming that's where most of the people who are listening to this want to go, they need to know like that employers will need to know, okay, this is how this skill actually translates into UX. So thinking about things in terms of product, in terms of like user experience, and that takes some refinement, but that's where I would suggest.
All right, awesome. So I know we're running a little bit short on time, so what we'll do, but I'm actually almost done with the questions that I have for you. We're getting to um, search methods briefly, and then we'll kind of inject more and more audience questions, and we'll also do at the end is do more like a rapid fire type of approach, where we'll take a few audience questions and try to kind of answer those.
Mhm.
In a rapid fire format, so to speak. I know we have a few of these saturated market questions. Um, so, Adam, here's what before we get to that saturated market stuff, um, here's what I wanted to ask you. There are many search methodologies, right? We like to call them channels, right? It's like search channels. Which ones are your favorites and why? And I'm referring to something like applying on company sites versus job boards versus recruiters, networking, information interviews, friends, etc. Right? And the second part of that, which search methodology got you most of your interviews, especially for your first role?
So I've a few different ones. I think like most people, I go on big job boards, LinkedIn, I assume that like the big ones um are pretty similar in terms of the listings that they have. So I don't know that they're going to be people who only put job listings on like Indeed or Monster or whatever the other ones are now. But it's probably not a bad idea to hit them all, especially if you're in full job search mode. I applying, like going to companies, um, I've never really like it hasn't been my approach necessarily because um, I think that companies are so big and there are so many different criteria that, I never, would think that like I really wanted to work at Google or whatever. And and then just like, find a role there because you never know who you're really working with. I mean, and so um it's like I don't focus so much on like, the actual companies themselves. I mean, we eventually apply, sure, go that way, but I don't use those as a springboard to look for the actual jobs. Um, recruiters, I get recruiter calls every day. I mean, and I have gotten a few jobs through recruiters. So that helps. There are a million different agencies out there, and they kind of they're there. I'm not going to speak ill of them because they've gotten me jobs, but they have their quirks. But yeah, those can be helpful, especially if you're interested in contract work. Then those are useful. Networking is tricky. I mean, like it's important. I'm not very good at it. And that's something that I've always wished I could be better at, but I mean, I try. I think it's especially challenging too because inherently when you're networking, like at networking events, for example, um, most of the people who are there tend to be people who want to get jobs. And so you wind up being in an environment where everybody's looking for a job and they're all like, pretty junior entry level. And you can make good friends and that's cool, but it's probably not why you're there. And it's probably not, always going to be the best use of time. So thinking about it again in terms of like what I was talking about with the audience perspective, like, okay, which audience is this going to like appeal to mostly? Because I don't really go to, I went to one UX Research Networking event last year that I thought was, oh, that sounds like fun. Like maybe I'll give that a shot. And I found myself swarmed with people who were, can you get me a job? Like, what can you do? Like, help me get a job. And I was like, I don't know who any of you are. And, no, I can't. And I wish I could. I wish I could give all of you jobs. But it's so that's kind of challenging. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, keeping the like opportunities, seeing opportunities again, like where you may not have otherwise recognized them. Um, Kind of like side channel things, like sister companies, people who like like do work in UX, that work in product, that I mean, like working like in volunteer agencies, like volunteer nonprofits, things that you actually really already like do with do events and things with. That's another like, potential like entry into it, at least in terms of like developing case study work too. Sorry, I went off way off the rails, so I'll
Let's keep you on the rails.
Yep. Thank
Let's
you. Thank you.
let's narrow this down. So let's just go one by one. Let's say, if you don't mind sharing, let's say first job. I think it was with some bank, right? So how did you actually land that particular role?
Um,
Which methodology was it?
yeah, I think that was probably, I mean, a while ago, but like either a recruiter got to me, or I was just like applying to a million things all the time. And it was probably just through like LinkedIn jobs, and like easy apply, and someone actually like returned my email.
Okay. Do you remember about the other ones? Like the second one, third one? Can you see a pattern? Like was it mostly recruiters? Was it
Yeah, it was. Honestly, it was mostly recruiters, and I think, um, yeah, gosh, I mean, like maybe I'm worse at applying for jobs than I thought. But yeah, I think most of the time, like recruiters reached out to me and said, "We think it'd be a great fit," and I thought maybe I would. So that's usually how I was getting jobs.
okay, okay, all right. So yeah, that's good. I know it can be tricky, right? Because especially now you're saying like, yeah, I get recruiters reaching out every day, and some people probably thinking, no, I'm just trying to start out. I don't get anyone reaching out to me, you know? So it's and don't worry, you'll get there as well, right? So once you're in the field, it gets much easier after that, like Adam was saying before, right? It's like the first job is the most difficult one. Just to add to that, we typically hear a lot of, like I would say, the pattern is networking in some way that works for you is typically most effective because this job boards can be this like, it's like a black hole basically that you apply, send your stuff, send your application into. And especially after the pandemic, that just got so much worse, right? Because there's just so much noise from both candidate side and employer side. Everybody's like, because there are so many remote roles, so everybody from everywhere is applying to all the jobs. So it's not like that there are like many more candidates competing for roles. It's just many more people applying everywhere. But you can obviously apply to more places, right? So it's just a lot of noise, and that's why it just gets very messy. So referrals and networking becomes even more important, right? So you actually have these warm connections because initially it's going to be hard with recruiters, right? When you're just starting out, especially when the market is tough, because recruiters, right, especially in the market now, or like last couple of years, right, it was much more difficult, right? Because the market was just much tougher, right? And the companies have more choice, right? So the recruiters say, oh, we have more supply, right? So we just reach out to those who are more experienced, right? So, and that's true to a certain extent. So what you can do along the way, right? So first of all, the good thing is that the market is improving. The second thing is just keep building yourself up along the way. All right. And don't rely on recruiters. I would not rely that initially as like the only channel, but require basically would rely more on actual networking. Again, I recommend this book, 2 Hour Job Search. Every time, every event, probably it comes up, right? So it's about using informational interviews as a method for networking. Because another book is called Never Eat Alone, right? Which kind of just changed my whole outlook about networking because I didn't like it initially. I was like, oh, just like superficial business card exchanges and just like, can you get me a job? Can you get me a job? Right. But it made me think about it differently. Whereas you actually build relationships and maybe you click with someone and then you help others, they help you, right? So it's basically more about relationship building rather than superficial business card exchanges, right? So that could help potentially as well. So let's see. Let's take another question here. So I know there are a couple of so Farouk was also asking, is it better to be a generalist or have a focus? For example, I'm aligning myself with video game adjacent experiences. Is that like putting all my eggs in one basket, or is it better in a saturated market?
I think it's actually better to be a specialist these days. And I never thought I would say that, but I think especially in the saturated market, or what we're calling this, um, I've seen people, I've seen job listings say like, what we're really looking for is somebody who, like has experience in like cruise ships. I mean, like, and like working with those or, like humidifiers or like whatever it is. And employers can be picky. I mean, and they are picky. So if you know already that you like really want to work in an industry, then like, yeah, I mean, like try to make yourself as like attractive to people in that industry as you can. And ultimately, I mean, you're always going to be sacrificing some opportunities for others. Just how it goes. But but the other thing though is that if you have domain experience in a field like video games, for example, then that goes a long way beyond just being a novice to like all of it, but being able to say, oh, and I did this. I mean, like I got jobs in advertising at Meta to do advertising stuff because I worked in advertising before, and gotten plenty of interviews based on like where I had worked that didn't have anything to do with UX.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. And you can try to do both, right? You can try to leverage on, it's like almost having like two profiles, basically, right? One is your specialized profile, and you're trying to leverage your previous experience and background, etc. And then you also do the general application, right? Because you don't want to just limit yourself, right? So you can try doing kind of two, like both approaches at the same time. And
Mhm.
that can be helpful as well. It's also like initially when you're just starting out, it's important to know the whole process, the whole UX process, to have comprehensive case studies, etc. Right? So you may, and again, this is like different kind of specialization. So I know you mentioned industry. This is more of like a role specialization, right? So but initially it's basically important. So you can try both in a way, right? And so just do one so it doesn't kind of preclude you from doing the other. All right. All right. Adam, so overall, before we do rapid fire Q&A, because I know we're short on time, we're pretty much out of time. And Uh, Here's what I also wanted to ask you. Just if we were to just kind of sum it up, what were your biggest mistakes and lessons on the way to your first UX job, um, overall? Like, what would you say, like the top, I don't know, three or so were?
Um, it's from a long time ago. I think, um, I think probably my biggest mistakes, were, um, not looking at enough other case studies from people who have actually been doing the work and had their own case studies, and then taking more inspiration from them. I think I could have done that a lot better. That probably would have helped. I think I should have been a little bit more self-critical in other ways too. I mean, like in terms of asking for feedback, on cover letters, or interview techniques, or what's the other thing? Yeah, resume, LinkedIn stuff. I actually just today was going through my Google Drive because I was looking for clean space, and I found old interviews that I had done, that I was like as like an interview for a job with US Bank, and also Dell, which I got an offer from, but whatever. They screwed up the contract and I couldn't get it. And it's actually very upsetting because I was going to be my first job, and then it wasn't. And I was very like sad. But then I got other offers, and so it was fine. But the point is that I could have like listened to my answers in those interviews and then actually done something with it, because we have a really, I mean, now it's normal, but back in my day, you couldn't record yourself doing an interview, and now you can. And so, listening to yourself doing an interview, um, wait, that sounds like that might be unethical. Don't record interviews just flat out. But if you happen to, then you can listen to like, yourself, and like, did I give the right kind of answers? Like, what could I have said differently that was better or not? And learn from that feedback that that you would do. And it's work. But yeah, I guess I mean just sort of like having good ideas, but being less lazy about them would have been the biggest thing I would have changed, because I kind of knew what to do, but I wasn't always doing them as much as I should have been doing them.
Okay, okay. All right, that's great. Okay, so I see a few questions from Chidinma here, and raised hand as well. So don't worry, we'll get you. We'll do the rapid fire Q&A. And Elsa, I see you have a few great questions here. So let's come back to these saturated market questions, because I'm not really like a fan of the term. I don't think it's the best way to describe it. I know it's a tough market. I'm not sure if it's the best way to describe it, but so let's come back to Annalisa's question, and then Joe Troop had a similar question as well. Um, so what Annalisa was asking, how do I get a career in such a saturated market? It seems like there are so few openings for someone who is new slash transitioning into the field. And I know this is a very broad and big question. So let me just kind of chime in the beginning and just kind of address the two main parts, right? And then Adam, I think you'll provide the more detailed insights and more kind of maybe more insightful answer. Um, we like to look at it as basically that using that product framework, right? So, and understand where is your biggest roadblock. So first of all, the good news is that market is improving, right? Based on the research we've done, right? Based on what I've been reading and what I see in the market, et cetera. So that's the great news. So it will become a little bit better. Second, again, use the product framework that we discussed in the beginning. Products versus marketing and selling, right? What you can do here, right? So if you want to stand out more, right, you can improve your product, meaning having better case studies, more experience, basically a better product, more skills, etc., that you can showcase, right? So that's one thing you can do. On the other hand, you want to ensure that you do not forget about the marketing and selling piece, right? So that you actually master the search and interviewing process, right? You basically you really dive deep, right? And then you learn, you read books about it, like that 2-hour job search, like that Never Eat Alone book, right? Or just using methodologies, get a coach, etc., right? A mentor, right? And really master that process. Because here's what I've also seen. There are like sometimes you have good, here's like one good candidate, another good candidate, and one is just great at doing the work, and another one is good at doing the work and also marketing and selling their work as well. And guess who gets the job in this tough market, right? So especially in the beginning, again, just mastering that like search and interviewing. And again, interviewing part is crucial. Don't think you'll just go with the flow, like master interviewing in advance. So once you get that one opportunity or two or more, right, you actually shine through that process, right? So you master whiteboarding challenges, mock interviews, portfolio presentations, like all those key phases. You might not get all of that at all the interviews, but you'll be prepared, right? So you can actually shine, right? And maybe you learn about effective job search methods, right? So you don't waste your time doing something that's not very effective. Instead, use the 80-20 rule, basically, right? And kind of spend, you know, the time on the 20% of the stuff that will get you 80% of the results, right? So maybe that's networking, right? Maybe that's, doing basically information networking via informational interviews, right? So it's just kind of understanding where your roadblocks are also, right? So is it in the product part or is it in being honest with yourself, right? So like understanding where the roadblocks are. So I know it was not very short actually, but I think it was a very big question, right? Kind of a question about the whole topic of today, right? So Adam, I'd love for you to like fill in all the gaps if there are any gaps you think.
I mean, see, it's harder than it sounds to like give like short answers. No, I think you really covered it, but I think I was actually going to like add to that too. If I add one thing, is that yes, it's a competitive job market, like that is for sure. But um, if that means anything, like in terms of like your job search, like it just means that like that you have to work harder for it. And I wish that there were anything easier to say, like like the one weird trick, like to getting your first UX job. But it just means that it's likely to take longer, and you'll have to like talk to more people and apply for more jobs and like do more kind of like refinements and everything, and it's a grind, and like I wish it weren't. I mean, it shouldn't be, but it is. And preparing yourself for that, though, I mean, like knowing that it's if you keep getting the same feedback that like no, you're doing everything right, everything's like like the way it should be going, then coming to terms and understanding that like yes, like it's just taking a while, but if you continue doing it and you constantly are checking in with other people whose opinions you value and who know what they're talking about and everything, then like then it's probably going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. And also, the good news is that about this whole tough market situation is that Um, I think it also weeded out a lot of candidates who are not truly interested, right? Because there were some people who say, "Oh, this is a great area. Oh, I don't need a degree, maybe. I don't need like a lot of education, etc." Right? And I can do it fast and make a lot of money, right? It sounds great, right? But then until all the the market gets different, right? So and that weeded out all the candidates because someone who's truly interested in this, right, they still keep persevering. Maybe they put it on hold, right? Maybe they come back later, but they actually want to do it. They want to make it their career. They want to make it their job, not just making money is fine, right? It's great. And the money is great, right? But it should probably not be the only thing, right? Because otherwise you won't be happy, right? Like 70% of your life, basically, right? So it's just my personal philosophy on on this, but all right. So we'll take a few more rapid fire. We'll do this rapid fire approach as much as we can try to rapid fire here. Um, so Chidinma had a few questions here. So I think it's specifically about UX research. And So she was asking, are UX research roles becoming obsolete? So it's a strong question here. I noticed very high unemployment for qualified individuals. And then the second part of like, or her second question, if companies are looking for less researchers, for fewer researchers, what are they needing more of?
Okay, the first point. Um, are they becoming obsolete? I hope not. I I haven't noticed like high unemployment. I don't really have a sense of everything I've noticed is just like very convenience sampling is the term. So I'm not really diving too deep into it. So I don't think so. I mean, I still have a job. I know other researchers still have a job. So, and we're still hiring people. So I think there's still going to be jobs. Like, who knows what they're going to look like in the next, few years. But for now, yes. And then the second one, if they are looking for few researchers, what are they needing more of? Um, I only I I don't want to say that like the first part is necessarily correct because I don't know that it is. Um, I mean, honestly, I don't. Um, so I can't say that part is true. So what are they needing more of? Um, This is a weird time in tech. I mean, AI has gotten everybody all in a tizzy about, like what we don't need anybody anymore, or we need everybody more for it and everything. So, and no one knows who's right yet. Historically, new technologies start like spawning off like new jobs and things. So maybe there's going to be something into that. But unless you're like basically a CEO founder of like, a giant tech company, then it's hard to say, that anybody really knows what they're needing more of. Because even just regular software developers that used to be the like the stock answer of like, oh, just learn to code. Like you'll always have a job. Like that turned out not to be true at all. So so it's hard to say that there's one field to be like, yeah, just go for that.
Yeah, yeah. It's also like some like I think I was reading Jacob Nielsen on like UX plus AI quite a bit, and I think there is a hypothesis also there could also be more of these UX unicorn roles kind of coming back into play, right? So opportunities for UX generalists as all these different AI tools let you do more work faster, right? So there can be a lot more output that one person can do. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need fewer people, right? That just means that you can do much more work because there is a need for lots of this type of work, right? And all these AI products can also create demand for actually designing the AI product. Like even in the program, we didn't even search for AI products on purpose, but they kind of found us, right? And we already had our students working on AI products, right? So, and a lot of AI products right now, they still have not the best user experience, right? So there's a lot of demand for that. I feel like a lot of people just got confused because it was like unprecedented time in tech, like you said, Adam, right? And we had this pandemic, right? So that at first there was this surge in hiring, then we had the drop, right, when things came back to more normal. Then AI came up, all this hype started. It's not all hype, of course, right? It's like some of it is hype, a lot of it is like big main trend. Um, and then a lot of people associated the layoffs with AI, right? Even though it happened at a similar time, it doesn't necessarily mean it caused it, right? So, but a lot of people kind of got scared, and even though based on research and et cetera, it seems like it's probably gonna do the opposite and just create more work. Like most of the, like you were saying, Adam, a lot of these industrial revolutions or like basically technological breakthroughs. Of course, nobody can predict, nobody knows exactly, right? But so but it's yeah, it's definitely. We did a whole event on this with not on this, but when we had Jared Spool on the first like 40 minutes or so, he gave a great talk about the whole state of the job market. The key point is we just need to get through this whole like rise and fall, and then of employment, right? And then the long-term trend, based on his opinion at least, and his research is good, right? It's kind of basically still growing at about the same pace, and long-term growth is expected to be the same, right? It's just a temporary bump, basically, if you think it was. So you can find, maybe Mika, you could put the link in the chat if you can find it, one like the latest event we had with Jared. He does a great analysis of like where the market is, etc. I'm also gonna say something forgot to mention about this last question. Uh, I'm surprised like how many people like actually don't find their key roadblock, right, when searching, right? Or don't gather feedback. I know it's hard to get feedback. A lot of companies shy away from feedback. They're afraid to get sued or something like that, right? But if you can't get it from the actual interviews from the companies, get it from others, get it from potential mentors, get it from coaches, get it from somebody, right? As you practice this interviewing process, etc., and identify the roadblocks, right? And basically, the more you put yourself out there, right, and basically get feedback on your portfolio, get feedback on the case studies, you'll understand, like you'll start seeing patterns, right? So, all right. So now we're out of time. So let's take one more quick question from the from Q&A here, and then start wrapping it up. So I saw something I wanted to address. So Mallory had Jude Troop, we kind of answered your question already together with the other one about the market. So Mallory had a question. I really relate to your story around trying different careers before finding UX, especially in your early career. Did you include your previous nonlinear experience in your resume? If so, did you position that experience in UX, UI terms?
On some of it. So I definitely did a little bit of it. Certainly the advertising part I was most recent and relevant and everything, so that made sense to do. However, um, going back even like further, like in the writing side of it, mm, I was a copywriter for a startup, briefly, I don't know, like 6 months or something like that. And I I probably talked about like UX there, to, like fudge that a bit and make it sound more relevant. Otherwise, I was selective. I was more selective about, the experience, which is also tricky too, because you have to explain gaps in your resume. And so, you can't just keep finding yourself, like once every 3 years or something. Um, so I think that that was a bit of a challenge too. But overall, and this isn't unfortunately that helpful, because to say like the more UX you have, the more you don't have to explain that. But explain it like as much as you can, but don't try to go crazy with it, and say like if you work a supermarket checker, for example, teller, for example, say like, yeah, I helped customers, find this with but get a better user experience. I mean, they may get points for creativity, but it also like could backfire.
All right. Thank you, Adam. So so I saw this quick question from Sakshi, which I also just really quickly want to address, because I feel bad. We have so many questions. I love all these questions. And to anyone who we don't get to, we'll try to address it in the next event, or just reach out separately. Feel free. So Adam, now you're going to get like 20 messages.
Yeah,
All
sure.
right. So I just want to comment on this question quickly, and then start wrapping up. So Sakshi mentioned, you mentioned creating good case studies for the portfolio, but how can I showcase my portfolio to employers when it seems that these days only bots are going through all the job applications? I have talked to multiple recruiters and other people on LinkedIn to hopefully get referred, but this also seems like it isn't helping me land a job. So just to quickly comment on that, Sakshi, right? So I mean, you still need a portfolio, you still need case studies, right? Because ultimately someone is going to hire you, right? And someone's going to need to see your work, right? And so that's not really going away, right? I would say based on our experience, it's just important to try to get to those hiring managers, try to get to those, to basically networking, again, the keyword, right? And just doing more of it. Just keep in mind that the market is tougher now, so you need to do more. You need to put more effort, right? You need to stand out more, etc. Right? So maybe instead of reaching out to 3 people, reach out to 30 people or something like that, right? So just an example, not suggesting exactly doing that, but um, so you'll still need that, right? And the goal is, and job search is not probably most effective job search is not just about applying to lots of jobs, right? Like most people think about it, right? What is much more effective is trying to network and reach out to people and do these virtual coffee chats, probably more efficient, right? The in-person coffee chats as well, right? And then you click with some people, again, read that 2-hour job search book. It will be much more clear. It has the exact system, exact process. And again, I'm not affiliated. I probably should be by now. So,
Yeah.
but Adam, do you want to add anything on top of that to that?
Um, yeah, I mean, I no, I think you kind of hit it. I mean, it's I don't quite know how bots are processing portfolios. And also like you didn't Sakshi didn't say if they were a designer or researcher, so I, definitely don't want to speak to design portfolio case studies. Um, so I wouldn't, be able to know about that. Overall, yeah, Michael, I think that your answer is probably the best one for this.
All right, awesome. I wish we had like 1 hour more or something so we can go through all these questions, but unfortunately we have to wrap up. So, Adam, just final top 3 pieces of advice for people transitioning into UX, looking to land their first role, um, to kind of wrap it up.
I One is to, like I said before, but it's really worth repeating. Like, be curious about it. Like, if you're interested in this, you should naturally be curious about it, and like, listen to podcasts, like, go to events like this, read books, and just try to find as many ways to learn about it as you can. Second is keep your eyes open for any kinds of chances that you have to work on it, because I can't imagine how many chances I know I passed, that I could have done so much better and easier if I had, thought about it before. And the third is is and the third is probably to um constantly, like, be looking for good feedback. And like, the entire idea of, usability testing and like user testing is like asking your users, like, is this working for you? Because and your users in this case are hiring managers or people like that. And so, I mean, this sounds a little, nice, but I don't know, like, realistic necessarily. But treat this like almost like a UX experiment in terms of like trying to get a job. And the product is you, and like, and you're trying to get this job. And your users are people who like would potentially hire you. So finding as many proxies for that as possible to get a good sense of what's working and what's not, and then applying those lessons to your job search, um, is like will help.
All right. Thank you so much, Adam. This was awesome. All the insights, love it. All the comprehensive answers. I know we went over time, but I hope we covered a ton. You guys got a ton of value. So again, hope you enjoyed this event and you guys got some great insights. As mentioned earlier, so people often ask about this program that we mentioned that we run, right? So as promised earlier, let me also quickly tell you about that. since it may be a great opportunity for some of you. So what you can do is basically not only build a very strong real client portfolio and real work experience, but also get the crucial soft skills like team collaboration, client management, presentation, along with career prep to master UX job search and interviewing so you can actually land a UX role. Who this program is best for? It is best fit for ambitious people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into a UX role in one of the most effective and efficient ways and without quitting their current jobs or other commitments. We're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. So we ran lots of cohorts over several years, helped about 160 people or so transition into UX. Alumni of the program have been hired by very many companies by now, like SiriusXM, Coach, Google, ABC News, Meta, JP Morgan, many, many others. So the Accelerator was also ranked by SwitchUp as a best UX program for many years in a row, actually #1 this year. Also featured in Fortune magazine and the ADP list. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from companies like Google, IDEO, American Express, Economist, a few others. What you gain after completing it is build and advance not just hard skills, but also the crucial soft skills, gain real experience, robust real client end-to-end case studies with digital products, expand your professional network, and master UX job search and interviewing so you can actually land a UX job. In fact, our grants have done so well that we offer money-back guarantee. So you either land a UX job by following our guidelines or you get your tuition back plus an extra $500 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginx.com. You'll see a link in the chat. Our cohorts are quite small and do fill up quickly, so please act soon. Otherwise, even if you're a great candidate, you may still end up on the wait list. Also, to thank everyone in our community who attended this event, you'll be eligible for a $500 tuition credit if you're accepted into the program. To claim that credit, what you need to do is by tomorrow request a free, no commitment career transition consultation where we'll do your first UX job hireability assessment for you. You'll see the link in the chat or can find it on the website in the consultation section. And by the way, these sessions are designed to not just be some kind of program pitch, but are designed to do the following. So we'll take a look at your background, skills, and experience, identify what is possible for you to do to become a highly hireable UX job candidate, uncover the key bottlenecks restricting your career transition progress, create a personalized action plan that will get you results, and also see if you may be a good fit for our UX Career Accelerator program. All right, so you see all the information in the chat about that. Finally, I also wanted to mention that we frequently run different types of virtual events. So we'll keep you updated about upcoming events and share resources via email and our newsletter, basically, that is usually sent like once a week or every couple of weeks or so. So we don't spam. It's only once a week, every couple of weeks. And you'll get a series, if you're new to our events, you'll get a series of emails with some introductory resources that will hopefully help you a ton in your career transition. So thank you again so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our wonderful guest for taking the time, taking a lot of his time and provide all the valuable insights. Adam, was a huge pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Michael. I'm happy to do it, and good luck to everybody. So add me, and I'm happy to answer any questions I can later.
All right. Awesome. See you guys.
Yeah.